This week I've got Tully, which is the third in this sort of trifecta collaboration between director Jason Reitman and writer Diablo Cody. The first of which was Juno, which is a film I still very much enjoy. The second of which was Young Adult, and now the third of which is Tully. So Juno was, all three are about women in these kind of pivotal points in their lives. Juno was about, a young girl who was pregnant as a teenager and probably not ready to be so, and dealing with the ramifications of that. Young Adult is this interesting kind of middle chapter where it's a woman who's not having a midlife crisis per se, but she's kind of having a midlife crisis where, she's hit a certain level of success, but other parts of her life aren't as successful as she'd like, and how she doesn't seem to parse that well. And then finally, we've got Tully, which is the kind of ending chapter, I assume. Both Tully and Young Adult star Charlize Theron, but they are not direct sequels to each other. So Charlize Theron plays this character called Marlowe, and she already has two kids who are, I believe, in elementary school, so they're a little bit older, and then they're clearly having kind of a surprise third baby, and she's very pregnant at the beginning of the film. Ron Livingston plays her husband, Mark Duplass plays her brother, and then Mackenzie Davis, who I love on *Halt and Catch Fire*, plays this character Tully, who is a night nurse hired to help her out because she caves and she's like, I just need help. And it's interesting because her brother is very rich, and it looks like they didn't grow up super rich, so he sort of made his way up in the world, and he's, there's a question of kind of classicism, and he's just like, hey, I got you this night nurse, and she's uncomfortable with taking him up on it in the beginning because she doesn't want to feel like she's not being a good parent or not capable of doing this herself. But I'm like, hey, if someone's offering you help, take the help. And it's interesting because Ron Livingston's character, the whole time I was just like, dude, help out more. You are a terrible husband, because where is he half of this film? Like, it doesn't feel like he is there for her and she really needs him. So honestly, it was a little daunting to me. Like, I don't have kids, I don't have a family yet, and so there were parts of it where I was like, this is terrifying. Why would anyone want to have children after seeing this film? They also get like real up close and personal with Charlize Theron is rocking the mom bod, which there's nothing wrong with, but like, you see a lot of things, and I was just like, oh, it's a non-glamorized version of pregnancy, which I actually appreciated on many levels, right? Because you see in Hollywood a lot like, oh, this person had a baby and then they lose 30 pounds and they're out and about in like a skinny, dress the next day, and you're like, what the hell? This can't be real life. This can't be what moms go through. Why are we holding them to standard? So to see someone as beautiful and like talented as Charlize Theron being willing to be like, yep, nope, gonna be a mom, like I'm gonna embrace what actually happens to your body after, like, it was very kind of empowering in some senses. I don't want to go too much into the plot because there are some very kind of interesting, bizarre things that happen. Again, watching it back, I'm just like, God, more power to moms and fathers as well, but just what she goes through is it's tough and it's challenging. So I thought it was really well done. I really enjoyed it, even though, again, I'm coming at it from kind of an observer perspective. And I'm sure if you do have kids and you can relate even more to this, like, you are going to really appreciate this film. So I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. Also this week, I have Bad Samaritan, which is a kind of thriller, I guess, like a thriller gone wrong. It's not exactly the type of film I usually watch. I don't love horror pop. It's not horror, but I don't love films where people scare you. Basically, the idea is the film is trying to scare you. It's from director Dean Devlin, who wrote Independence Day and Stargate, but his last film was Geostorm, which is not. I didn't even bother to review it. Like, that's how. So it stars David Tennant and Robert Sheehan from Misfits. And it's also got Carrie Condon and Carlito Olivero. And so the idea is Robert Sheehan and Carlito Olivero's characters are valets, and they run this scam where when you drop off your car keys and you go to dinner or whatever you're doing, they take your car keys are probably attached to your house keys, and so they find where your home is based on your GPS, and then they rob you. And I was like, damn, that's a kind of genius scam. Like, I've not seen that on film before. I was actually pretty impressed by the creativity around that, or I'm just a naive person and don't think the worst of people in this world. So the idea is that they pick the wrong person to try and rob, and that is David Tennant's character, and he has this super fancy smart house, and it's super swanky. I think he pulls up in a Maserati, and their eyes light up, and they're like, oh my God, you know, this is going to be the catch of a lifetime. And unfortunately, this is like a mild spoiler, but I think it's also in the trailers. Like, he is a creepy kidnapper, possibly murderer, like psychopath, who has a woman tied up in his house that Robert Sheehan's character like stumbles into when he's trying to rob the place. And so then it's a question of grappling with, how do you get this information out, right? Like, if you say like, hey, there's a woman trapped in this house and I know this because I was robbing it, that lands you in trouble. Like, how much of your own personal safety are you willing to risk in order to help a stranger out? So I was home alone when I was watching this, and you know, it's a little creepy. It's a little creepy to watch. I don't think it's the best done thing in the world, like, but being someone who doesn't watch these movies all the time, like, I was like, okay, you know, it was enough for me to get by. There's a lot of questions I had about, like, why would these characters do this, or why wouldn't you just go to the play? But I think going into a film like this, you kind of have to overlook that. It did creep me out about smart homes. Like, I was like, good thing I don't have one, because, and valets, but good thing I don't have a car nice enough to valet or someone to go steal from. Overall, not the best thing in the world. Certainly probably better than Geostorm. But if you're really into this type of movie, like, it's a fine entry into that kind of canon of crime gone wrong. David Tennant's super creepy in it, so you know, if you like him in those types of roles, he's the villain in the first season of Jessica Jones. He played Doctor Who. It's definitely a very sort of different attitude for him than like what most people see him in as Doctor Who, where he's not a dark, scary, murdery dude. So it's up to you if you want to see that one. I'm only going to give it 2.5 out of 5. Like, it could have been a lot better, could have been a lot worse, and I think that's going into it the low expectation bar of Geostorm. So 2.5 out of 5 for Bad Samaritan. And then finally, I've got Overboard, which is the remake of the Goldie Hawn Kurt Russell film. And this time around, it stars Faris and Eugenio, Derbez, who is very, very funny, by the way. Like, if you haven't seen his stuff, he's huge. He's a big star in Mexico. It also has Eva Longoria and Mel Rodriguez from Last Man on Earth. So the idea is, again, it's a gender-swapped version of the original Overboard, which if you haven't seen, the idea is that a very rich person, Eugenio's character, he's super rich, he's a billionaire, he's a playboy on a boat, and Anna Faris is this, like, single mom with 3 kids, and she is sent to clean the boat, and they meet, and he's a jerk to her, and then something happens, he falls off the boat, and he loses his memory, and he washes up in the town where she is, and she remembers that he's a jerkbag, and he doesn't remember anything about himself. And so this is where it gets a little creepy. And people seem to really love the original Overboard, and I've not seen it, honestly. Like, but if I had seen the original, if the premise is that Goldie Hawn loses her memory and Kurt Russell takes her in and, like, basically starts a relationship with her, I was like, that's rapey. Like, the idea behind that is rapey, where it's like, where's consent come into this? So having it be the guy who loses memory feels a little bit mitigating that, but it doesn't make it great, where she's like, hey, so she convinces him that he's her husband. And she doesn't, like, there's no way for her to access his money, but she just kind of wants, like, extra hands around the house. And it's a little weird. Like, sometimes it is sweet between them, and I think a lot of that falls, honestly, on, like, his charm. But there were times when I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this, especially in, 2018, where it's like, are we really telling these types of stories still? There's a lot of physical comedy in the middle. So he gets a job working for Eva Longoria's husband, Mel Rodriguez, on a construction site, and, like, everyone speaks Spanish there. So they make fun of him because he's obviously never worked a day in his life and, has to do manual labor. And, there's a lot of comedy that comes out of that. And it is sweet. Again, it's sweet him integrating in it. There's also this whole subplot where, like, his sister basically, like, knows that he's in this town with amnesia and doesn't do anything to help him because she wants to take over the company that, he's supposed to be running. And there's a lot of family politics there. It's a little telenovela-ish, and they know that, and they make fun of that, and they, like, reference it. So I was like, all right, at least you're self-aware. But overall, like, I don't know, the jokes felt a little outdated, even though this was written recently. Like, I really like him. I like Anna Faris too. I want her to succeed, in part because I'm just like, hey, like, it's probably rough going through a divorce from Chris Pratt, and you don't want to live in the shadow of your ex-husband. Not that she was in his shadow, but like, she started out more famous than him, and then he became Chris Pratt. So I want the best for her. I want the best for her. I don't know what else to say. I don't know if I could, in good conscience, recommend this movie. Like, if you're going to see a film this weekend, I want you to see Tully, but that is rated R. It's not for everyone. Like, I think it's a more serious film. If you want a dumb comedy and you are willing to disconnect, like, maybe you'll enjoy Overboard. If you love the first one and, like, the Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell kind of, you know, romance, like, they do not have the same chemistry as Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell for obvious reasons. Unfortunately, I feel like I can only give this one 1.7 out of 5. Like, I like him so much. I like her. I want her to succeed. Again, I don't have anything against it personally, but I think there are some flaws in it where it's like, okay, well, one, she's committing a crime by kidnapping this man and depriving him of his family, and, you know, also bringing a complete stranger into a house where there are 3 girls. Like, they make fun of that part, which is like a little uncomfortable for me, because I'm, you know, it's a legitimate concern that I'm sure many people have, where it's like, anyone around your kids, you know, you don't know strangers. Like, why would you trust this complete stranger to sleep in your house? I'm sorry, I think it's a skipper.